And we are going to go right into our last panel of the day, and that is the Rural Renewal through Resettlement panel. So we'll invite the panelists up right now, and I want to introduce the moderator, Tracy Dolan. So while they make their way to the stage, I'm just going to say a few words about Tracy. Tracy Dolan is the director of Vermont's State Refugee Office. Prior to being appointed to the director position, she served as Vermont's Deputy Commissioner of Public Health for 10 years. She has worked in public health for 25 years, getting her start in northern Canada, working with vulnerable populations in reducing the risk of HIV infection. She spent 10 years working in international health, primarily in sub-Saharan Africa, with a focus on HIV and AIDS care and prevention, maternal child health, and youth reproductive health. She also developed and implemented child protection programs in post-conflict communities in Afghanistan and Uganda. In recent years, she was the recipient of the Vermont Public Health Professional of the Year Award and the Snelling Leadership Award. She holds a Master of Science in Community Health. Tracy will be moderating our next panel. Please welcome Tracy and the other panelists to the stage. Thanks.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here. I would like to start by introducing our panel, and I'll start with VTYacouba Bogre. He is the director of AALV. AALV is an organization that provides support and service to immigrants in Vermont, refugees and other immigrants as well. He holds a law degree from Ouagadougou University in Burkina Faso, and I believe he came here in 2003 and has done a great deal of work for Vermont. Also, I would like to introduce Joe Wiah. He is the director at ECDC. He holds a master's degree in multicultural service leadership and management from SIT, and he has been directing the ECDC, which is a refugee service organization, since it opened in 2021. Prior to that, he worked on housing with SEVCA, which is a community action agency in Brattleboro. And I believe he came to the U.S.
I came to the...
Yeah, it's on.
I came to the U.S. in 2012, actually.
Yeah, 2012.
As a
yes.
student.
Yeah, from Liberia. Thank you. And finally, I would like to introduce Khalil Anwari, my apologies, and he comes to us from Afghanistan. He holds a degree in public policy and is the director of workforce development at USCRI, which is also a resettlement agency. I thought I would begin just talking briefly, for those of you who might not be familiar, about refugee resettlement and how it works generally, and then we're going to open it up to some questions for our panelists. So refugee resettlement takes place primarily through several kinds of organizations. The first part of refugee resettlement, when refugees first arrive locally, happens with refugee resettlement agencies. There are 10 national agencies, and 3 of them are represented here in Vermont. We have USCRI, and they have offices in Colchester and Rutland. We have ECDC, they have offices in Brattleboro and Bennington. And we also have Grace Initiatives, a smaller organization with an office in Manchester. We also have other organizations that assist refugees. They're just not refugee resettlement agencies, but they provide services like AALV, like World Learning, and many of the English language organizations. There are several health organizations. And there's a Vermont Afghan Alliance, so some smaller organizations assisting different populations. And the way it works in general is that people arrive. So the president makes a determination of how many refugees we're going to receive as a country. So this current fiscal year, it was 125,000 for the country, which is, it sounds big, but the U.S. actually resettles relatively few compared to other countries. Most refugees are resettled by lower income countries closer to conflict. But 125,000 is a lot relative to our prior administration. And so they are arriving, and the 10 organizations, those national organizations, determine how many will go to which of their offices. So for ECDC, USCRI, their nationals come together and determine how many will come to Vermont. And the Vermont community also consults with the agencies and with me. We all talk together to say, how many can we handle? How many are we able to support? And when they arrive, let's say they show up at the airport, a resettlement agency case manager will pick them up, ideally bring them right to their apartment, although that's not so easy as you can imagine anymore. We have a housing crisis, so sometimes it's now to a hotel or a motel or a Airbnb or to a temporary place or to a college campus. The resettlement agency helps them try to find a job, helps them register their children in school, sign up for benefits that other low-income Vermonters are also eligible for, and a variety of other kinds of services. And eventually, the goal is economic self-sufficiency. And so eventually, this is a population that's very motivated to go to work and often wants to work right away. And eventually, they are relatively independent. We find a really high rate of entrepreneurship among immigrants generally and refugees, actually higher than the rate of entrepreneurship from American-born Americans. And so we see that also here in Vermont. So that's generally how refugee resettlement works. And of course, I'm talking about those agencies, but then all the help from all the community, many volunteers, people at schools, people in healthcare. You know, UVMMC does a lot of the early health screening for folks when they arrive, and all kinds of community organizations like AALV and others. And today's focus, I know a lot of it is about research and entrepreneurship, and so we're going to be asking a few questions. We're going to hit on 3 general topics. The first is going to be asking about how we welcome refugees in a way that makes them feel included. The second will be asking the panelists for some innovations that they have worked on with refugees. And then the third question will be opportunities to grow. And then we're going to go back out to you for some questions and answers. So we'll start with our first question. Our first question is, how do we welcome new people to Vermont in a way that helps them feel like they're included as part of the community? And maybe we'll start with VTYacouba. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I think the state of Vermont has been resettling refugees for over 40 years. And we've resettled many groups coming from all parts of the world, many of whom came here with various life experience and also a lot of skills. So to come to your question, I think building a community that would be more welcoming would require that we consider all these aspects of individuals' life. We cannot tell them what to do, but we can help them put their feet and move up using the skills they have acquired, using their life experience so they can build more stable life, and also teach us what we can do to support them and help them sustain their lives. Because most of the time at AALV, one thing we've noticed is every time someone comes and we direct them to a successful program, they will tell us that this is not what I think I would need. We have forgotten to ask their previous life experience. We've forgotten to ask the trauma they have gone through. Even if you give them successful pathway and you are not considering the trauma they have lived, they will at some point give up because you are putting a burden that is not taking into account what they are going through. That could be a major step that should help them succeed. And trauma has been shown to push people to fail. Because sometimes people want to do their best to succeed, but they would be dealing with a lot of things that we are not looking at. So that would be the first thing we should consider as a community if we want to see people succeed. Using their life experience, but also helping them access resources that can help them overcome some of the past traumatic events they have lived in their previous life before being resettled into our states.
Thank you so much. And for a little background, for many refugees before they arrive, they've spent years in a refugee camp, 5, 10, maybe an entire generation. For some of them, they have not been able to work in years. Maybe their children haven't been able to go to school, whereas others, more recently, have come in on a slightly different status, and they may have been plucked very quickly directly from war. So the trauma is all varied and pretty extreme. And so when Jacob speaks to that trauma, that's an important part to think. The other piece I just wanted to mention is, as people arrive, they do arrive with different skills. Some people arrive with blue-collar skills, or less professional skills. Others may be arriving and they may have a background in healthcare. We may have doctors and lawyers arriving as well. So it's really spans the gamut of the different kinds of experience. All right, I'd like to invite Joe Wiah to answer our first question as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and also thank you to UVM for this invitation. To the question is, I can't speak generally for how refugees feel welcome, but I can tell you what I've heard from refugees since I started doing this job. I think the first thing that refugees, as they arrive, and for us in Southern Vermont, being the rural community, is the welcome spirit, the way the community itself welcome. And we at ECDC, when we started, we knew very well that first, diversity. In Southern Vermont, we don't have so much diversity. And so we thought, what can we do to, make refugees feel welcome in our communities? So we work with our communities, and we started what we call the co-sponsor groups. And co-sponsor groups were a group of, 7 volunteers from the communities who came together to provide wraparound services to refugees. So that's the first aspect, feeling welcome. And as my colleague mentioned, the refugees come with different backgrounds. Some are very professionals who would expect when they get here, their backgrounds will be, they will be able to further, find jobs in the field of studies. So one of the things we also started, we had a program called University Relations, meaning using the skills that refugees have, working with colleges and universities to see if, linking those folks to those colleges and universities. We also have other programs like mental health. We also have programs like, skills building for female who also want to build their skills in specific areas. So there are so many things to do to make refugees to feel welcome. As you may know, especially South in Vermont, refugees resettlement is still new for us. It hasn't been there. I think the first time we heard since the 70s during the Vietnam War, that was when we had refugees resettlement. So in 2022 was the first time refugees resettled in Brattleboro and Benetton area. So we're still building our systems and structures. But one thing I can say, we have a resilient community from ECDC to other service providers who step in and say, okay, now we have to change the way we do things. From the Agency of Human Services, and I saw one of my colleagues at BDCC, and the SIT, which is the School for International Training. We knew very well of ECDC that we wouldn't do it alone, but rather needed the support of other partners who are trained and have the connections and expertise in those areas. So we went to BDCC for employment, world learning for English language support, and all of us came together, including the Agency of Human Services, to provide these services. So the short to that question is collective approach, wraparound services for everyone, welcoming refugees in your homes, people who go to the airport as volunteers and say, you are welcome to Vermont. And I must say this too, though, and Tracy will testify, may testify to that. Because of Vermont's welcoming spirit in the South, and I don't know about enough, we have one of the least out-migration than other places around the country, and it's because of the spirit of Vermonters.
Thank you very much. Yes, across Vermont, we hear that pretty regularly from refugees, that the thing that makes them stay, the factor that's the staying power for Vermont is the people, which is a wonderful testament to Vermonters. And finally, the same question, how do we welcome new people in a way that makes them feel included? For Khalil Anwari.
They say Vermont has 2 seasons, winter and preparing for winter. But honestly, I think we're getting more adept into providing warm welcomes to our new community members, especially new Americans. We consider ourselves a one-stop shop in USCRI, Vermont. in which we are providing many different services, including interpretation services, housing services, healthcare services, and employment services. And the program that I'm leading specifically focuses on that connection between successful integration into Vermont communities and the nexus between that and the workforce, and how workforce integration could be the pathway to true integration into communities. So I think accessibility is always a huge proportion of making people feel welcome. That is why our language services that have been running for almost 2 decades now provide many different, provide translation and interpretation services in many different languages. So although my program specifically focuses on Afghans who have been resettled in Vermont, there are around 500 Afghans here now, both in between northern and southern Vermont. It seeks to not only provide the essential services and try to be a response to the immediate needs of the Afghan community, but also provision of pathways towards a more sustainable solutions for their long-term integration into the community. So for instance, if I were to provide an example, I could speak about some of our partnerships that we are currently working on. One would include our partnership with CHT, through which we are aspiring to build pathways for home ownership for Afghan community in Vermont. That means obviously utilizing existing pathways such as the shared equity programs and other programs that could definitely give our clients that essential feeling of belonging in Vermont and in their communities. I think if you ask any employer who has recently hired Afghans or are working with Afghans, they would testify that one of the issues, one of the challenges that they've had with their Afghan employees are not less work. A trend that I have been seeing is Afghans are looking for places that can provide them overtime work. And if they do not provide overtime work, that's a huge consideration in choosing to go work in that place or not. So these are hardworking people trying to truly integrate into this society. I think one of the main challenges that I should mention is that many of these individuals are here while their families are still back in Afghanistan. So many of the clients I work with, they work 60 hours weeks, and not only they sustain self-sufficient life here in Vermont, they also do send money back home to support their families. And although Tracy is in the know and advocacy work has been ongoing both in DC and also in Vermont to try to facilitate family reunifications, but that still is a challenge.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, I was speaking to someone. So we resettled about 500 refugees last year. I'm using the word refugees broadly. There are a few other categories there. They include humanitarian parolees, the Ukrainian, many of the Ukrainians who arrived here. They also include some Haitians who arrived also through a parole program. Parole in this case is an immigration status. It has nothing to do with the justice system, just to be clear. And also special immigrant visa folks who are people who come here because they have been associated with assisting US forces. But on average, about 500 last year. We hope to, if the housing allows us, to resettle about 600 people this year. So I wanted to just give you that context as well. Thank you. And I did speak to a Ukrainian last week, speaking of the inclusion. She's actually living in a smaller town in the north. She's there through a sponsorship program called Uniting for Ukraine, another federal type of refugee sponsorship program. And she was noting that what was making her feel welcome was that everyone she connected with, regardless of what their role was, seemed interested in helping. And so that leaning in really made her feel welcome. As a state, one thing we're trying to do to make people feel more welcome is to make sure our language access is more available. Up until relatively recently, we really needed multiple languages available for services in Chittenden, but not so much around the state. We didn't see as much of a demand. We're seeing more demand now, and we're a little behind on catching up. So making sure that every healthcare organization, when you walk in, knows how to access translation. Every social service organization, every mental health organization knows how to access interpretation is one important piece also of an inclusion. So we're going to move on to our second question now, and this is talking about some of the innovations in refugee resettlement. And maybe we'll start this with Joe. Any innovations that you think might be helpful for folks to hear about?
Oh, thank you, Tracy. Before I go to the question, I also do want to mention about transportation and housing. Transportation in a rural resettlement is a key component of our inclusion because refugees, as you may hear, the program is designed for self-independence. Refugees want to be self-sufficient. And the program is designed within 3 months that you should be self-sufficient, meaning to be less dependent on state and federal benefits. And for refugees to move to that self-sufficiency, one, they need to find good jobs and then be able to support themselves. And in rural resettlement, one of the challenges we have there is transportation. Because of transportation, we cannot move to other smaller towns. Now, so coming to the question, which is some of the innovations, we at ECDC, in partnership with World Learning and University of Vermont, got a grant from the Lees Foundation, and this grant focuses on 4 components. One is do a research through, in collaboration with the University of Vermont, to research on transportation and housing. The second component of that is we have internship for UVM students. Currently, we have about 4 to 5 students at our programs just learning about refugees resettlement. Another component of the program is also engagement with landlords. Because there's sometimes a misperception of refugees housing, and so sometimes we get a little bit of resistance from some landlords. And so this program is also meant to reach out to landlords, educating them who are refugees, the skills they come with. And then the fourth component of this program is also from the research, we're going to have a panel discussion, like event like this, where we're going to provide the outcome of that research to policymakers, and hoping that the outcome of this research findings will help policymakers to be able to make decisions on refugees resettlement. So those are some of the programs in terms of innovation that we engage with currently at ECDC.
Thank you so much. Maybe we'll go over to VTYacouba to learn about what's happening at AALV.
Thank you, Tracy. In 2008, we partnered with the psychology department at UVM here to have students coming to AALV once a week to observe and meet the community we're working with. Because this was something new, having large families and groups coming from war-torn countries or individuals who have been sexually assaulted in their home country when they were trying to flee to safety, being resettled in Vermont. And our hope was at that time to have students immerse themselves into the experience of these families that were coming to Vermont and understand the need of providing psychological support, but also understanding the fact that mental health treatment or mental health counseling is different based on the culture where you are coming from. Some places would use traditional doctor to heal or go through healing processes, Some people will think that because I've been raped, I have bad karma, and therefore I'm useless to society. And these are things that us, as an organization, we could not resolve. That's why we reached out to the University of Vermont to have Dr. Karen Fandakaro send some of their students come and observe, but also help us triage so we can understand how to deal with some of the acute cases we're facing, but also making sure that we are sensitive to the needs of these communities that are being resettled in Vermont, mostly women. Imagine you sitting, helping someone to fill his green card and asking the names of the father, the parents, or the father mostly of the kids. The first child will have one name, the second one, and at the third name, the mother would break down and ask you, why are you asking me these questions? This is what's happening to me when I was running to safety. I've been raped. And all these kids are from different fathers. I see in them the trauma I've gone through, but I love them because they are my kids. It breaks anyone's heart. And we have case managers leaving because that reminded them the trauma they have also gone through. But having professionals, young students who were willing to learn from these past traumatic events and build their career or also address some of the needs the community were facing was really impactful for our organization. 10 years later, we have social workers and psychologists embedded at AALV. We are sharing their time with Connecting Cultures. So anything that would be traumatic or cases that we see that would trigger any past traumatic event are referred to Connecting Cultures. And these counselors are at AALV. They don't only work with families or individuals who are traumatized, they work with the entire families, mostly young kids who can show these behavioral issues in schools. Sometimes kids might not be able to cope well with their education, not because they have unsafe housing or they don't have enough to eat, but also because what their parents are going through. This is not sometimes their fault, but it's probably because they have gone through past traumatic events. Imagine sitting, as I said earlier, with a child that was born through rape. You can't hate that child, but imagine you having to show this love to the child every single day. And Connecting Culture, through our collaboration with UVM, was able to help us overcome some of these traumatic events, helping kids in school when academic advisors are reaching out and sharing concern about kids' behavior. We would automatically have someone from Connecting Culture working with the individual, the child in school, but also reaching out to the families so parents can have access to the right care. But at ALV also, we were able to work with some of the parents to have, for example, our women group, where through storytellings and cultural events like gardening, people are able to try to overcome and wean themselves from some of the behavior they are facing. So last year, we were able to get from the SAMHSA a 5-year grant to implement in schools a trauma system therapy for refugee and immigrants. Our hope is to see a large change at the end of this 5 years process so kids can overcome some of the traumatic events their family is facing. But also reminding the state that resettlement and support to newcomers cannot be done alone. It cannot be done through organization. This is a state effort. If we've chosen to be a resettlement hub, we need to put resources. Sometimes the most difficult part about the state here is trying to do more with less. At the end of their training, kids are leaving, the students are leaving the state because we are not able to employ them, to offer them decent opportunities that can use their skills and empower our communities here. And these are things that we hope could change over time with all your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and I think that key is the collaboration. You will hear the innovations often involve collaboration. It's very difficult to do refugee resettlement as a lone agency, but what is successful is when we're collaborating with other organizations. Thank you. And Khalil.
So to briefly highlight 2 of the innovative solutions that we are working on, thanks to Tracy, the governor, and also the state legislator for accommodating and supporting these innovative solutions. One aspect that we are really interested to understand and study is to see the economic impact of our Afghan clientele on the local economy in Vermont. In order to do that, we have initiated a research project that strives to understand that. We are, although in the preliminary stages and trying to collect data right now. We are in the data collection phase, but we're hopeful that by the end of the year, we will jump into being able to analyze the data, and hopefully once we are done with the research, we will share it with different stakeholders to make sure that we not only understand the economic impact, but we also understand the challenges that they're facing in their integration into the workforce itself. Of course, not to put Tracy on the spot or anything, we also worked a little on a concept idea of bringing technology into the refugee resettlement industry in a way that it helps our humanitarian work to better provide services for our clientele. Specifically, we worked on design of a mobile phone application that is also supported on desktops and laptops to have all the services and all the communications that are needed with a client in basically one software. That is still awaiting the green light from Tracy. Hopefully that will happen soon.
I'll give you an update, actually, on that one. No, that's fun. So just to understand how funding actually works for all of this, if you're curious, most refugee resettlement is funded through the federal government. Some of the funds come into the state through the refugee office. That's the office that I'm in charge of. Some of the funds go directly to resettlement agencies and service providers. And then there are other funding sources like AALV, as you can hear from VTYacouba speaking, has become very involved with mental health, trauma, all of that kind of support for families. And so they've built a reputation and have a SAMHSA grant. And then there are funds that have been appropriated through our legislators here, and that's relatively new. Up until relatively recently, the state, just like many states, to be honest, didn't put funds uniquely into refugee resettlement. They mostly relied on what comes in through the feds. However, in recent years, the legislature has put more in, and this past year, they put in several $100,000 to help with that transitional housing because we were having a housing shortage and people needed to stay in very expensive short-term housing, and so there was some help there this year and last year. So on that app, actually, it's interesting. So USCRI headquarters, so we have, here's an inequity. A lot of Afghans arrived. Very importantly, they were funded. But different populations started getting funded at slightly different levels. So we had more funding for Afghans, which was appropriate. We had a lot of Afghans. So we had funding to support that app if it could be piloted with just Afghans. But actually, the headquarters of USCRI weren't able to move forward if we didn't secure funding for use with all populations. So that's your update now. So that's why we can't.
Thank you.
But we'll keep working on it and see if we can combine funds. So I think that's all three on that question around innovation. And now we have a question about what are the other opportunities you think that Vermont has to think about for growth? Are there things you're doing that you think is working and you could do more of? Or what do we need to think about for growing our ability to bring in refugees and to build this entrepreneurship piece? I think housing is one, and we can touch on that, but what are the kinds of programmatic things we could be doing or research things we could be doing to grow? And maybe we'll start with VTYacouba.
I think we have some answer to some of those questions already. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's our willingness to invest and support the well-being of these families we are resettling here that is lacking, or the resources are not following our desire to support them. As a state, for example, I always think that it's a lost cause to see professionals coming, but not investing enough resources up front to help them recertify so they can go back to some of the professional life they had. Like we had sometime, like some of the state hospitals don't have enough nursing staff, for example, or we don't have enough teachers. We want to train, but we do have these folks coming already with this knowledge. I think it would be cheaper for us to invest, even if it's through a year or a year and a half program, to help them recertify quickly so they can go back to work and help the students in the school districts where the kids are going, to help our hospital system understand the needs of refugees, because these are people, professionals who have worked with the refugees or the population that is coming here. They understand their healthcare need better than anyone who is starting from school and graduating from a university here in the state. But if we are able to help them recertify, it will be a plus for our tax base. It will be also a better way to manage the resources we have, instead of having to let them maybe languish 5, 10 years sometime before they're able to start recertifying. But if the state is able to invest upfront and also pull together some of the resources that we have, throughout Vermont, we have many training programs. I'm always surprised that sometimes some of those programs don't have enough students to start a semester training. But if we are able to combine them, instead of everyone running their program in their own silo, having them work together, funneling newcomers, providing ELL support so they can learn English and also get the right skill training, the state will make better use of some of these resources. And these are things that can be done at a cheaper cost.
Thank you so much. Joe, on that question around opportunities to grow.
Yeah, I think I'm also going to add to what Jacob said, recertification. When refugees come, they come with skills, experience, but how to certify them to be able to work. Just look at us, 3 of us here. Even though I did not come as a refugee, but I came as an immigrant as well, as a student. And Jacob is here. And here we are, in our own way, leading these organizations. So the more we invest into refugees and immigrants, the better for our state. Upfront invest into refugees because it's going to pay off. Also skills training, invest into skills training, and it's also going to pay off. Other programs, we talk about housing. Housing is one of the key. If we put so much into refugees coming to our state, we also have to invest into refugees staying here. And one of the things I keep hearing all of the time, for which sometimes refugees will want to leave to go to other states, is housing. Currently at ECDC, we have this relationship with the School of International Training. Refugees resettlement in Southern Vermont wouldn't be happening right now if we never had a college available to us. All the refugees that are coming go to that college campus and stay there for 3 months at least. And it's been paid for by the state. And nowhere else, at least from what I know, any state that is doing paying for refugees staying on a college campus for a period of 3 months. So those are some of the programs. But the key is recertification and training.
Thank you, yeah. And there are other states paying for transitional housing, but there aren't other states paying for this kind of model, and it is unique because folks stay together, and so you can deliver services more comprehensively, and it really moves people towards self-sufficiency more quickly as well. And go ahead and on things that you think we need to look at in terms of opportunities, scaling up, et cetera.
So quickly, to mention the housing challenge, we're all aware of it. So to give you a glimpse, historically, we were able to resettle between 325 to 350. And this year, we needed to ask for a pause, at least in Chittenden County, where we are currently focusing. And we are hopeful to be able to resettle around 220. Individuals, and for the coming year, we hope between here and Rutland to resettle around 300 individuals. However, that is also subject to many factors, including housing. So housing has definitely been a huge challenge. And to look at other places where best practices have been either utilized or established. For instance, the experience that our colleagues had in Lewiston, where through refugee resettlement, we saw a revival of otherwise declining communities and little villages or specific communities like that. Or with the, it was mostly Somali wave of resettlement, or when we can see our neighboring state, Massachusetts, where the Bosnian resettlement had the very same effect, less crime and also revival of local communities. So in the same light, I think we can definitely copy and put those practices into our modus operandi here in Vermont. And if I may be so bold to suggest that if our landowners through farming could potentially consider seller financing options to refugees coming and working on the agricultural sector, or other such business opportunities that could have long-term sufficiency, self-sufficiency impact on refugee community and the new American community as a whole, I think that could definitely be a changing point.
Thank you so much. Thank you. The Federal Office of Refugee Resettlement did a study that spanned 10 to 15 years, and they just put it out this year. And they compared the amount that the feds invest in refugees, so paying for those, some of those initial services. Some refugees get a small cash amount for the first 8 months, the amount that they put into resettlement agencies to help. And then they looked at the income and then the taxes that come back to the federal government. And the gain, so the in the black, was in the billions over 15 years. So the investment is very much worth it on an economic level for the United States. The first imperative is the humanitarian imperative, and that, of course, is why we do this, and that is a gain, obviously, for the world. But the second gain on the entrepreneurship and the economic piece is very clearly documented. So it's a very good investment, and these agencies do a lot with very little. And so I'm excited, to hear about kind of the opportunities where we could do more. I wanted to pause and see if you have any questions. We have a great panel here, and they would love to dig into your questions.
Oops, sorry.
Great.
By the way, you guys are doing God's work. Bless you, may God bless you. My question is, when you guys have refugees from major cities like Kinshasa or Nairobi or Addis Ababa with millions and millions of people, do you guys feel that moving Vermont refugees to rural areas are helping their mental health and allowing them to better process their traumas since they're not overstimulated by living in a major city?
Great, yeah, so folks coming out of a really big city coming to Vermont, is it helpful to their mental health, or what is the impact on coming into a smaller place? Joe, we'll start.
Yeah, I can start. So we are intentional as to how we do the resettlement. So for instance, we intentionally build communities. So for our programs, we have the Afghan community because we want to have existing communities in those rural areas. It's the same with, Congolese, for example, or another ethnic group from Africa. So what we do when we do our projection for the year, we intentionally look for ethnic groups so that they will have that connection, that family support as they come. So you are not isolated, you are not the only person in that community, but rather intentionally building communities. So we have all of the groups like Afghans, Congolese, Eritreans, Ethiopians, just intentionally trying to say, okay, this is the community we're building so that you are not isolated. And we do not, right now, we would have put people in Springfield, Bellas Falls, for those of you who understand Southern Vermont, but because of not having the critical mass of group of refugees that we want to start with in a particular community, we are kind of holding off until we have that critical mass to say we put in, 6, 7, 10 families in this community so they are not isolated.
Thank you. And maybe we'll go to Yacouba. And I'm curious, Yacouba, this question about people coming from a really busy city, coming to rural, do they ever talk about that as a relief? But speak to the whole question, but I am curious about that piece of it.
Thank you. Our organization does not resettle, but looking back at the past 40 years plus that the state has resettled refugees, and also looking at the trend of immigrants coming to Vermont, I think that could not add more to the trauma. In fact, having a smaller state like Vermont can help people focus more on their need and have resources that can help them sustain their life. If, as a small community, we are able to care for each other, we can help families, newcomers sustain their life and also overcome some of the post-traumatic events they are facing. If you look at Vermont, from those first group of Vietnamese that came in around 1980 to the groups that came from Bosnia, Africa, and also the latest group from Afghanistan, we see that people are coming with various life experience. Not everyone was resettled or lived sometime in the suburb of Hamburg before coming here, like the Bosnian. Most of them lived in large cities and developed countries in Europe before coming here, compared to groups coming from Kenya, Somalia, or Ethiopia, for example. But that should not be a reason not to put resources that can help them overcome some of the trauma they are living. And also learning from their experience to build more resilient communities, because we can all learn from each other. This community relies on each other to build a safer community. If we have successful groups that were resettled in Vermont, the new ones that are coming are going to pull their experience from those groups and also learn from their experience to be successful, if we are willing to just give them the little help they need to succeed.
Thank you. And Khalil, maybe folks coming in from Kabul, what have you noticed about their experience coming into Vermont? What is the feeling of moving from a major capital city? Yeah.
Let me tell you about my own experience.
Okay.
So I was an individual, politically active, part of government in Afghanistan, very busy in my previous life. When I came to Vermont, the feelings are different. Sometimes you feel that peace, that the serenity in the nature, taking walks. But at the same time, while the predominant feeling for me was a feeling of peacefulness and inner calm, sometimes it was, has the world abandoned me? Where is everyone? So I think you experienced a little bit of both coming from a big city. Kabul is projected, or approximately it has around 6.5 million residents back in Afghanistan. So it is definitely a huge change. But I think over time, as we have this proverb in Afghanistan, we say patience is very sour, but it has sweet fruits at the end. So once you have lived a little in Vermont and gotten to be part of the community, and you feel that initial belonging with the community, I think that's where you get most of the peace and most of the inner calm.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Do we have another question back here? Yes?
Hi. About 20 years ago, I had the pleasure to collaborate and volunteer with Judy Scott, who used to run what used to be called the Vermont Refugee Resettlement Program. It was part of my high school volunteering project. So I can definitely sympathize with the progress that I've been able to experience since I was a student here in Vermont. My question is, forward from 20 years ago, looking at what kinds of projects are you currently undertaking to involve the community beyond the University of Vermont to assist and co-design, as well as what are your top priorities? Like you've mentioned, healing and treating trauma, as well as housing.
Sure. Can I ask a little clarification? So I think you asked, the first part was, which other communities, do you mean refugee communities to help co-design, or other community partners?
Other community partners.
Okay. And your second question was other priorities in addition to what you've heard here?
Yes.
Okay, great. So any other key partners other than those you've mentioned that you are collaborating with?
Beside the UVM, for example, which has had great and extensive collaboration with AALV for our mental health services and also our farm program, we have worked closely with area agency like the Department of Health. Throughout COVID, we stood up and help run all the clinics that the state has been running for testing first and later on with a vaccine. And we could not have done so if we didn't have a community that was willing to share what they see as need and how the message we want to convey about safety would be shared in various languages, but also being mindful of some of the post-traumatic event on the way in some cultures, treatment was forced on some individuals. So the Department of Health is one of them. But also in the state here, I would share more with the private sector here. We've worked closely with many employers to offer skill training at AALV, starting with the home health aid training we offer until we stopped during COVID. And now we want to restart, but we are waiting for the city of Burlington to finish their cycle so we can start a new one at AALV. And also the Advanced Welding Institute. Most of the folks who have gone through the welding training are all working at FabTech and also at Blodgett right now. And these are things that last 3 months, but help folks sustain their lives. And the school systems, we've also asked the school district to think about those students that are leaving their premises, follow them so they can come back and help train the new cohort of students that are accessing our school system. Same for the police department in Burlington. We have had several meetings with the police to have a trusting community. For the community to trust our police department, we need to have individuals who are reflective of the community the police department is serving. And that cannot be done by hiring from outside. We need to make sure that we empower these kids. We need to empower the families that are here so they can also serve in the police department. They can serve as EMS so the community see that the work these folks are doing is for our own good, and we need to also contribute.
Thank you. And in addition to the priorities they spoke about here, I just wanted to highlight the ELL, the English language learning. As we hear about people who are finding jobs, what we do hear eventually is that people are ready to move up and they want to move up, but English is a limiting factor. And so figuring out more ways to make it easier to access English language learning, especially if you have a family, it can be very difficult to get to classes. And so I know one thing that folks are doing is English language teaching at the workplace, and that's been very successful. I didn't know if you wanted to speak, either Joe or Khalil, to any English language work that you're doing that might be working.
So we have our English language purely taken care of by the School of International Training. For over years, some of you may know SIT has been providing English language. And some of the professors who retire, who live in our community, have that experience, so they have been providing English language support. When it comes to who we've been partnering with, there are so many partnerships we have because collectively we can do it. We can't do it alone. So we have the BDCC that is just doing our employment. We have the school district. Sometimes we forget that the kids have to go to school. In the school district, we partner with them to be able to provide, support to young children to enter schools. We also have partnership with Boys and Girls Club to be able to provide, support to the youth that are coming. We have partnership with private sectors, like some of the employers who step up and say, I would teach, I will pay someone to be able to provide English language support on job training, on the job, And then we also have the transportation, the bus system that says, you know what, I'm going to step up because even though it's not in my budget, even though I don't have the support right now to go to that nearby community, but because refugees are living there, so I have to go there. So there are so many partners we partner with in terms of providing support to refugees. I think the next question was the future or something?
I think it was just around if there's any additional priorities. And so I called out the ELL.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's great.
Great, yeah.
Thank you. Yes, did you want to speak to any priorities or this aspect of any other partners?
ELL, I think that is definitely important. What we are doing in our program, the workforce development, we are trying to ease the access of our clientele to some coveted roles, such as, for instance, something that most of our clients have been traditionally interested in is getting their CDLs. But
Can you translate CDL for people who don't know what that is?
commercial driving licenses.
Yes.
So, but unfortunately, due to language barriers and language proficiency levels, it has always been hard for them to get through the trainings and also be able to pass the examinations. So in partnership with our ELL department inside the USCRI, and of course some of the contacts that Tracy provided, we were able to launch a new class that is specifically designed to familiarize and acclimatize our clients with the lingo that is used in that specific industry, to be able to prepare them to go through the different phases of examinations and also get their CDL licenses, hopefully. Very quickly, if you will allow me, two more things that I would like to mention. One of them with who we are engaging with, who we're partnering with. I think something that I would like to call upon you all as our community members is that we have a portion of our program specifically deals with entrepreneurship, navigation, and guidance trainings. We have had the immense pleasure of partnering with some investors in Burlington. I will not name them, obviously, but they have been doing great work counseling some of our clientele in going about startups, starting their own businesses, in how they want their businesses to develop, what is a good economic structure that they should base it off on, and many other counseling sessions that we have in that regard. And one last thing that I would like to mention, although a bit prematurely, is that we are trying to be able to create a collective of advocates, both those who have lived experiences and those without, who are working with New American community, to join us next year for a 3-day advocacy work with the state legislator, and that is obviously open to anyone who would like to join.
Thank you so much. And a shout out to the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation for a lot of their work on the commercial driver's license curriculum. They were great. And we have another question here. Yes.
Hello, this is a question from our virtual audience. Simone asks, in the current political climate, what can be prioritized to develop a safer community?
In the current political environment, what can be prioritized to develop a safer community?
Correct.
Sure. Anyone want to touch on that? So around safety and refugees and their sense of safety.
That's a tough one. But yes, what I can say, just going back to the past political climate we had, rural communities, especially Vermont, has been a very welcoming community. So I'm not overlooking the fact that we should have safety as a plan, but Vermont has been a very welcoming community that always, try to go beyond what sometimes go around around our country politically. I am not saying there are no isolated cases in our state. There are, but we educate our refugees, in either cultural orientation that look, things may change. You may hear different, isolated cases where someone you can stand for yourself. Don't be bullied. You have the right like every other American. If you hear something going on, always report it to us. If you cannot address it, we will stand with you to address that. So those are some of the empowerment we give to our refugees. But overall, Vermont has been a very welcoming community, so I must say.
Thank you. I'm going to give Yakuba the last word on that. I just wanted to add also, as a state, we have invested some funds into knowing your rights types of seminars and some legal rights supports so that people can learn more. But Yakuba, I'll give you the last word on this question, and then I think we'll wrap up.
I think mistrust would come from the fact that we don't know each other. right before, a week before we shut down because of COVID, I got a call from someone at the FBI field office in Albany. He introduced himself and said he would like to come visit and see how we can work together. At first, I was rattled. Say, why are they calling? But later on, when we shut down, we had several conversations over the phone. And I asked him, what are you expecting from us? What do you want to know? And he talked about all the facts and things they can do to make sure the community is safe. Trafficking, workplace violence sometimes. And these are things that sometimes we deal with. We reach out to employers when employees are talking about wage theft, when we see that families or individuals are being trafficked, because sometimes we see many folks facing some type of violence, but they don't want to say who is employing them, but they have to work and document it. And over time, we were able to get them when we reopened at AALV. They had a presentation. We introduced them to various segments of the community where they met with various organizations. And from there, I think it has built some trust, not looking at the FBI as these federal entities that can lock people up. That's sometimes what people think. And the same thing was done with our local police departments here in town. We told them that we don't want you to reach out to us when there is a problem. Please reach out to communities and share about your work and see how you can help people. Violence can be prevented if we build structures that can help us stop that from the root cause, from escalating. If I show up at the police and you are not willing to meet me, but you want to come to me when you have issues, I would not trust you. But if you are willing to reach out to the community, patrolling your neighborhood, introducing yourself to the community members you are called to serve, people will trust what you are doing, and they will be open to sharing their concern with you and looking at common solutions so we can make this place a better place for all of us.
Thank you so much, and thanks so much to the panel and for sharing their experiences. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for sharing that with us and for your work. That wraps up our final panel and our first day, and I'm sure you all feel like flopping on this couch right now. But I want to invite you to join us because we're going to have a reception in the Fireplace Lounge and an opportunity to network and meet a lot of the folks that have been here today. We also have a poster session occurring. So researchers from the University of Vermont, from Auburn University, and the University of Wisconsin-Madison will be presenting. So please stop by and speak with those research faculty. We also have a raffle for participants today. So if you're here in about 15 minutes to half an hour, we'll pull a name out of a basket. So you'll see an opportunity to put your name in a basket, and then you have to be here to get it. We've explored a lot of aspects of placemaking, and thank you to all of our presenters for your time and for your rich perspectives. We're really looking forward to another great day tomorrow, so I hope to see you all back here in time for a 9 o'clock start tomorrow. Thank you all very much.